Revolution is immoral. In free societies, sometimes referred to as democratic societies, but the United States in particular is a constitutional republic. I know Armenia also has a constitution and is a republic, so I think maybe technically Armenia is also a constitutional republic. In free societies where you hold elections, revolution is immoral. It's wrong. It's the wrong thing to do. What you see here, violent mobs storming the centers of power. Now, I know the title of this video is The Fall of Armenia and America. If you know me personally, I don't actually believe that either of these nations is about to fall. But if they were, this is what it would look like. This is exactly what it would look like. Now, I went to bed on January 5th, and I turned to my wife and I said, tomorrow is a historic day. Tomorrow will go down in history as a historic moment in our country. And she doesn't follow politics, so I had to explain to her our process, that a new president is not technically a president-elect until the Electoral College votes are read in the Congress and everybody votes to approve or disapprove. And then you have technically, officially, a new president or whoever won the election. That's the winner is declared on January 6th. And I informed her that there were also competing slates of electors that were sent in by a number of states, and that it's entirely possible for the alternate slate of electors to be read, and that there's never been this many alternate slates of electors sent, and that it's potential that some congressmen and senators will be objecting, and that's the historic moment. Because every 4 years we do this same thing. Every 4 years. But in this case, I told her it would be particularly historic because something different is probably going to happen. And it happened. And it happened like none of us predicted. We saw violence. We saw the Congress, the Capitol building. As you saw in the picture, the windows being smashed in. And there's a lot of different narratives flying out there. But let me just add mine to my voice and this narrative to the plethora. It's never right to resort to violence in a free society. Now, in both of these cases, Armenia and the United States of America, these people are responding to what they perceive as an evil, as something historically wrong that has happened. And I think there's a parallel. Both countries are at war. Armenia just suffered the first video I showed you was Armenia on, I believe that video was November 10th. Probably 11th in the United States, but in Armenia, I think it was November 10th when Pashinyan agreed to the ceasefire, the Russian brokered deal to stop the violence. Essentially, Armenia lost. Some are saying a war. I refer to it as a battle. This is an ongoing war. So the war's not over. The war hasn't been won or lost. So I would refer to this recent Nagorno-Karabakh conflict as a battle that Armenia lost. And when you lose a battle, there's upheaval. there's dissension. There are those who want to point fingers and point the blame. And sure, there's plenty of blame to go around, but everyone needs a target, someone to blame. And the government is inevitably the one to blame, and the head of that government will be the one to blame. So Armenia lost a third-generation war, right? Third-generation warfare is bullets and bombs and even drone warfare. The war that America, at least those protesters, some of them, believe that they just lost, was a fourth and fifth generational warfare, a battle in an ongoing war where forces opposed to the United States won that battle because the ultimate result, in Armenia's case, it was a ceasefire, and a very negative, the stipulations for Armenia in that ceasefire were you have to give up all this land that you lost and et cetera. Right. And that was a loss, a big loss. In the case of the United States of America on January 6th, it was the Trump supporters that believe this election was stolen from them and by nefarious actors, and that January 6th was the day that could have been rectified. That was the last resort for a wrong to be righted, that those in power could have corrected this injustice. And it was not done, and they resorted to violence. Now, there's one of the narratives going around is facial recognition software has identified Antifa or potential Black Lives Matter activists. So this kind of violence has been happening for the last several months, except it's generally been on the other side of the aisle or supporters of the incoming, the president-elect. In this case, purportedly, it's the right, the Trump supporters who are doing it. But apparently, a mob, there's plenty of disaffected and people who are very upset. And I'll show you why, at least in the case of in the United States, why those people, one of the reasons why, because of a narrative that's going around, why they were there and why they're upset. But generally, the Trump supporters don't resort to this sort of mayhem. But it only takes one in a crowd of already elevated emotions to act, and it will trigger everyone else. The breaking of the windows. It takes one person to break that window, and others will storm in. And that's the nature of mob violence. And there's an argument that the guy who broke the window has been identified as an Antifa, a member of that violent faction. But that does not absolve all of those other people, many of whom were Trump supporters, storming the capital of their government. Revolution is immoral in free societies. I want to reiterate that. Revolution is immoral. And in an age where morality doesn't really mean much to most people, or I shouldn't say to most people, to many people. What does it mean to be moral? I won't go down that philosophical rabbit hole right now, but we all know right from wrong. We know in our hearts. We're born that way. We just are truth detectors. We've got truth detectors, what's right and wrong. And when I say revolution, the Beatles wrote a song, Revolution, it's going to be all right. Popular song. But it is immoral because in a free society, you have a system by which the government can be changed and transformed. It's called reformation. And those are two opposing concepts, revolution versus reformation. But when a country becomes so corrupt, let's flash back to the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, I don't want to bore those who aren't interested in history, but in 1908 had adopted a constitution that had been drafted in 1876, I believe, or 1874, sometime around there. So the Constitution had been drafted, but had been set aside. And it was essentially to appease the West, because the Western civilized countries had constitutions. So they drafted a constitution, and then it was set aside for 30 years in a bloody reign of a bloody sultan. And then that sultan was overthrown or deposed or put in his place by a revolt of the Young Turks and the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. Ironically, Revolutionary Federation, they were now a part of a constitutional government. And then those that came to power in that change in 1908 took advantage. It was two opposing parties, the Young Turks and the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, coming to power. And then it was the Young Turks that assumed the most powerful positions in the government, and then overthrew and opposed, and then ultimately overthrew all the intentions of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. And so in that case, where you're massacring your people, when you have a supposedly constitutional form of government that is abusing its power, then revolution may be the only resort. And so there are those in these crowds that are thinking that that is the case in our country, in the United States of America in particular, that there is a corrupt system and revolution is the only answer. And I'm not on that side. I'm not saying that our country couldn't get to that place, but we're not at that place. So I am resoundingly condemning the actions, the violence. But let me just show you why I'm going to read an article in a second, but I just want to show you some graphs. Oops. Put myself back on screen. All right. So these, you can't really see it here. Oh yeah, you can. This top left is the vote count, vote tally from Michigan on November 3rd and 4th. This one on the lower left is from Georgia, and the one on the right is Wisconsin. And these are just, I picked three. These are three states that were contested, battleground states that President Trump needed to win these states in order to be reelected. And there's something that the narrative that is out there is this anomaly. And I'm just going to point it out. I imagine many of you have already seen this and understand this, but for those of you who aren't, those of you who have no idea what's going on in the United States, this is one of the narratives that incited this violence. Let's just look at this one down here from Georgia. And the time is, so November 3rd is when the election. Here, by midnight, Donald Trump in red is way ahead. And the counting, normally in the United States of America, the winner is declared sometime after midnight in the United States of America. Now, in Georgia, there's a 3-hour difference. So, the West Coast is still counting votes, but this is, midnight in Georgia. Sometime after midnight, there's this spike. Roughly 2 a.m., there's a spike in the Democrat vote and a small spike in the Republican vote. Further west of Georgia, another time zone, an hour or two later than Georgia, you see similar spikes. Over here at around 4 a.m., Wisconsin, there's a major spike, but no corresponding spike, at least that's visible in Republican votes. And then in Michigan, there's a major spike, a tiny little uptick. Now over here, you see spikes. You see spikes on both sides. Both are going up here. Both are going up here. But here, it's a significant, and this is viewed as an anomaly. Something happened. These states all shut down voting around 10 p.m., 10:30 p.m. or something. And also, let me point out these time zones. These all happened within an hour or two of each other, right? Since the time zone in Michigan and Wisconsin are are similar. So this is right after 6:30 a.m. on the following day was this spike. And this is just before 6 in Wisconsin. And they're, I believe, in the same time zone. So this is within an hour and a half of each other. And then this happened at around 2 a.m. in Georgia, which is an hour or two later. So it's actually within an hour or two of these spikes. What happened here? The problem is our political system and our judicial system, you don't have time to figure all these things out. And there's supposed to be a peaceful transition of power. And when you don't have the confidence of the people, the system collapses. So I'm not saying this is the end of the United States of America or of Armenia. I'm just pointing out the narrative that led to this. Let me close with this. ODIHR, I looked that up. What is it? I didn't look it up. It's right here. The Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights calls for restraint and respect for the democratic process following U.S. election unrest. Watching the increasingly disquieting events unfolding in the United States Capitol in recent hours following the November general elections, the OSCE, the Office for Security and I always forget what this stands for. Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights voices its concern regarding the integrity of the democratic process and calls on all sides to keep to the principles of democracy and rule of law, ODIHR said in a statement. As one of the 57 countries of the OSCE region, the United States has committed not only to hold democratic elections, but also ensure that the candidates who obtain the necessary votes are duly installed in office, while the U.S. legal system provides for a smooth transition of power restrained by all those involved in the process remains vital, even in a country with such strong institutions and traditional respect for democratic norms. Neither incitement to violence nor violence itself has any place in the democratic process, the statement says. All right. Now, I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to say subscribe and share. I just couldn't let this day go by without posting a video on this regarding this historic event. Finally, let me just remind you all that my videos can be also seen. If you know people that don't watch YouTube, you can go to this website, christianpodcastcentral.com, and you can forward some of my videos here. The one I have that's most recent up here is about a week ago from New Year's message to Armenia inspired me to rant. So go to, you can also watch a number of other podcasts. They put their most recent ones up at the top, but you can go down to this list if you're interested in listening to faith-based commentary. Thank you all. I'll see you tomorrow.